Hello, students. Welcome to our afternoon read aloud. We've been learning about the presidents, right? Because of President's Day. First, we learned a good amount about Abraham Lincoln, our 16th president. And then just the other day, we started learning about George Washington, the first president. So there is something they have in common besides both being presidents. One other connection between George Washington and Abraham Lincoln is the issue of slavery. George Washington had slaves, and Abraham Lincoln was very much against slavery. Slavery was something that was part of our nation's history from just after Jamestown started. So we learned about Jamestown starting in 1608, and only about 10 years later, enslaved people were brought from Africa to start working very hard on all the tobacco farms that the colonists in Virginia were starting. And slavery grew and grew and grew to be a terrible and huge issue in our country where millions and millions and millions, they were owned by their owners so they could be treated however their owners decided. And that was something that we had in our country for almost 250 years until the Civil War. The Civil War started because there were people in the North who didn't agree with slavery, and also as there was more expansion westward, right? More and more land was being taken over. People were arguing about whether the land people could have slaves there or not. So that's what started the war, and Lincoln held the Union together and freed the slaves in the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863. Not all the slaves, but anyway, but people were fighting against slavery for a long time before that, including the slaves themselves, right? They knew that what was going on, what was happening to them was not right, was not fair. And today we're going to start to learn about a very famous enslaved person who fought for many people's freedom. And her name is Harriet Tubman. Young Harriet Tubman, freedom fighter. And there I see a young black girl, maybe on a big farm. There's a big White House in the background. Young Harriet Tubman, freedom fighter. Harriet Ross Tubman was born a slave, but she spent her whole life fighting for freedom. There are no slaves in America now, but when Harriet was born around 1820, slaves worked on big southern farms called plantations. They worked in the hot sun from dawn to dusk. That's from sunup to sunset. It was hard, terrible work. Harriet and her family belonged to a farmer named Edward Brodess. They lived in a one-room shack on his land. It had no windows or furniture. Harriet and her family slept on rags on the dirt floor. There's her mom cooking, and there she is with her sisters. Harriet was only 3 when she started working. Even though she was just a little girl, she had to carry messages many miles for Mr. Brodess. She was also hired out to work for other families. Sometimes they were very cruel to her. When she was 9 years old, Harriet cleaned houses and took care of babies. It was hard work for a little girl. Harriet did not complain. She did not want Mr. Brodess to sell her to another master. 2 of her sisters had been sold already. So there's the master taking away her sisters to sell to somebody else. After dark, the slaves got together to talk about freedom. They told stories about Moses, the man who led his people out of slavery, and they spoke about the Underground Railroad, which took slaves to freedom in the North. The Underground Railroad was not really a train. It was a group of people, both blacks and whites, who felt slavery was wrong. Some people hid slaves in their homes. Others led slaves from one station or house to the next. Harriet loved to listen to these stories. One day she promised herself she would take the Underground Railroad to freedom. But Harriet almost didn't get her chance. At the age of 15, she was in a store when a slave and his master ran in. The master told his slave to get back to work. The slave refused. His master was so angry, he threw a heavy iron weight at him. But the weight hit Harriet in the head instead. Oh no, look, she got hit in the head. It was very terrible. Harriet was sick for many months. She almost died, and she had a terrible scar on her forehead for the rest of her life. In time, Harriet went back to work, but now she wanted freedom more than ever. Oh, that's the picture from the cover. Thinking of freedom. Finally, in 1849, Harriet heard that Mr. Brodess was going to sell many of his slaves. She knew the time had come to run away. During the day, Harriet hid in people's houses. She knew Mr. Brodess was looking for her. At night, she walked for miles through the woods to get to the next station on the Underground Railroad. The journey north was long and dangerous, but there were many people to help her on her way. At last, Harriet reached Pennsylvania. There was no slavery there. Harriet was free. Harriet could not forget that her family was still in slavery. She went back and brought them to freedom too, but there were many more people who needed her help. Harriet helped over 300 slaves escape on the Underground Railroad. The slaves called her Moses. They loved this brave woman very much. The slave owners hated her. They offered a $40,000 reward for Harriet's capture, but Harriet was never caught. During the Civil War, Harriet worked as a spy for the Northern Army. She helped many more slaves escape to freedom. Even after slavery ended, Harriet kept on helping people. She spoke out for women's rights. She started schools for black children and homes for poor black families. When Harriet died at 93, she was given a military funeral. That's like all the honors of a soldier. It was a great honor for the woman who had fought so hard for freedom. And since I got to do something at the end of the book, I want to go back and look at this part right here. I think this is a cool picture in the forest where she had gone back to lead many slaves to freedom, and we'll learn more and more about this. She actually worked really hard at her job as a free person and saved her money so she could keep going back and helping people to get free. She's leading some people to the forest, and they started to call her Moses. Like Moses, they mentioned at the beginning, was the leader of the Israelites in the Bible who led them out of Egypt to freedom. So in the same way, people started calling Harriet Tubman Moses. And there's that wanted sign, $40,000. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed our afternoon read aloud. Don't forget to keep washing your hands, cover your coughs and sneezes, do some reading, do some writing, help your family around the house, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.